People who've dated a psycho. What incident made you aware that you were dating a psycho? Story 1. We were riding the train home from a date. I looked over, and she was logging into her ex-boyfriend's Facebook account. I asked her what she was doing, and she casually told me she was logging into his account. When I asked why, she said, "I'm just checking up on him. I want to make sure he's okay. He never changed his password." Her checking up on him turned into reading not just his posts, but also his private messages. I asked why she couldn't just look at his profile normally, and she said, "He blocked me." When I asked why she didn't just text him if it was that important, she said he had blocked her number too. I had so many more questions, but she started getting upset and defensive, and we still had a long train ride ahead. Story 2. My ex accused me of cheating when I started studying at the very quiet library while in college. I was taking organic chemistry and some upper-level science classes, so I understandably spent a lot of time studying. He was a high school dropout who played video games like Battlefield and Call of Duty at full volume when he wasn't working at his part-time job at a large retail store, which made studying at home almost impossible. A few years later, I left him to attend grad school as far away as I could. He ended up moving back to our hometown and started a lawn business that was pretty much a front for his drug dealing and usage. Story 3. To get from the bedroom to the kitchen, I had to walk through the living room, which meant walking in front of the TV. I always moved as quickly as I could, but I would still get yelled at. Sometimes I had to wait 20, 30 minutes before I was allowed to walk past. One day, while my husband, now ex-husband, was out, I decided to rearrange the living room. I moved the TV to a different wall and shifted the couch to face it. The room was still the same functionally, just rotated 90 degrees. Now, when I walked from the bedroom to the kitchen, I didn't have to pass between the couch and the TV. When my husband got home, he saw the change, but said nothing. We ate dinner and watched TV as usual. The next morning, he refused to get out of bed or speak to me. He wouldn't leave the house, go to class, or even watch TV. He wouldn't make eye contact or acknowledge my presence. This went on for 3 days. He only left the bed to eat or use the restroom. I was panicking, thinking something was seriously wrong. At the end of the 3rd day, he told me he felt I had been punished enough for rearranging the living room without asking. He admitted that he liked it better that way, but he still felt the need to punish me for not consulting him first. Story 4. I went out to eat at Buffalo Wild Wings one night with a few friends. I told my girlfriend about it, and later I saw a couple of her friends sitting at a table nearby. They never ordered anything, just drank water and occasionally glanced at us. After we finished eating, we walked outside, and I saw my now ex-girlfriend's car in the parking lot. Her driver's seat was reclined all the way back, and I could barely make out that she was in the seat, trying to hide. At this point, I was already feeling weirded out. My friends and I left, and as soon as we backed out, her car started and backed out as well. She began following us through the parking lot. I texted her, asking what was going on, but she kept insisting she was with her mom. Story 5. I was married to a man who once said he was going to the woods to hurt himself. I called the police thinking he was having a military PTSD episode. They stopped him, took his gun, and informed me that he had never been in the military. This was 4 years into our marriage. I was stunned. I took photos of the damage he had done to our home and got a restraining order and a divorce. The courts don't look kindly on using false military service as an excuse for violence and emotional abuse. He was a skilled con man, gaslighter, and abuser. From what I've heard, he did the same to his second wife, who also divorced him. Story 6. My ex wanted me to text him my work schedule, and then he would call me at work and wait in the parking lot for me to come out. He always wanted to know how much was in each paycheck. One time, I texted him my schedule, but he misread it and freaked out. He searched for me nonstop for 6 hours, called my entire family, and was about to contact the police. It was his own fault for misreading the text. I ended up breaking up with him in public because he refused to believe me when I tried to end things in private. It got to the point where even random people nearby commented, "You just got dumped." Story 7. This didn't happen to me, but to a friend. His girlfriend had been taking trips to a specific city for months because her mother was diagnosed with lupus and apparently needed a lot of care. One day, before leaving for another trip to see her mother, she broke up with my friend, saying she felt like she was being a bad girlfriend and couldn't give him enough time. My friend took it well, wished her the best, and she even left the door open for the possibility of continuing their relationship once her mother got better. She spent that weekend texting him, saying how difficult it was to care for her mom and how she hadn't slept because she spent the night at the hospital. The whole time, my friend was super supportive, even sending her studies on lupus. A few days later, my friend was scrolling through Facebook and saw a 360-degree panoramic photo posted by someone he knew had a fling with his ex. The photo was taken at a popular music festival near the city where his ex's mom lived. He panned around and sure enough, there was his ex partying at the festival. Instead of visiting her sick mom, she had been at the festival the whole time, hooking up with this other guy. My friend confronted her, but she ghosted him. He wasn't even angry, just sad. She could have broken up with him months ago, but instead, she lied for months to have it both ways. Story 8. I had been dating this guy for a while, and things seemed to be going well. I'll never forget the day he took me to see Aladdin. We got back to my place and everything was normal. We were talking and suddenly he got this strange look in his eyes. He said, "I can't see you anymore. I'm afraid I might hurt you." I thought he meant he might hurt me emotionally, like cheating on me. I kind of laughed and told him not to worry, that I was an adult and we could work things out. Then his voice changed and he said, "You don't understand. I've been having dreams where I hurt you. I mean, really hurt you." Then he jumped off the couch and ran out the door. I never saw him again and didn't try to call. The whole thing shook me up. I guess I should be glad it stopped there. Story 9. It was a normal Sunday evening. My ex-husband had been unemployed for a few years, and I was responsible for approving dozens of employees' time cards before Monday, which took about an hour and a half. My ex had always had a temper and was an alcoholic. That evening, I had just finished making dinner for him and our son, and while eating on the floor, we couldn't afford a couch, I started approving the time cards. He started yelling at me to stop working and pay attention to him. Before I could even respond, he came up to me with a full plate of food, took a huge bite of tilapia, chewed it, and spat it all over my face and keyboard. I was in complete shock. I couldn't believe the man I was married to would do something like that. Story 10. One night after a fight over something trivial, my girlfriend fell out of bed. She stood up and started running into the walls, injuring herself. I tried to stop her, but she kept going. Our downstairs neighbor heard the commotion and called the police. When they arrived, they saw her sitting on the couch, bloody, and immediately became suspicious of me. I tried to explain that she had been running into walls, but they didn't believe me. Then, right in front of them, she stood up and ran headfirst into a wall again. The police escorted us to the hospital. While we waited, she started cleaning the floor with gauze, saying she needed to make it clean so the fish could see out of it. Story 11. He sent me to pick up a baby shower present from a store. When I got there, they told me they didn't have the order. I called him, and after a conversation with the cashier, she handed the phone back to me and said she wouldn't tolerate his rudeness. When I got home, he denied being rude and got angry at me for taking her side. Later, he told me I had ruined everything, and we wouldn't be going to the baby shower because his friend was upset. I was confused, so I called his friend to apologize. She had no idea what I was talking about. That's when I realized he had made up the entire situation to make me feel bad. It hit me that he had been gaslighting me our entire 3-year relationship. Story 12. We met at a bar and bonded over our love for a good drink. She could drink as much as I could, which was a lot for someone her size. We'd have fun together, but I started noticing that she would start drinking first thing in the morning. One day, I tried reducing the amount of alcohol in the house, but that didn't go well. One morning, I was out of alcohol, and she demanded I take her to get a drink. When I tried to leave for work without doing so, she jumped in the car wearing just a robe and wouldn't get out until I agreed. When I passed the store, she got so angry that she threw the car into park while I was driving. Story 13. In my senior year of high school, I dated someone who was obsessed with S. At first, it seemed like a dream come true. She was out of my league and everything was great. But after a while, it stopped being fun. We were together all the time, and it became too much. Looking back, I realized she was probably missing emotional support from her family. It makes me sad thinking about it. I hope she found the support she needed. Story 14. I went to get an IUD placed, and the experience went horribly wrong. I passed out and had to go to the ER. My boyfriend at the time was more concerned about ES until my roommate set him straight. I also had to go to a cancer center for infusions for my condition, and I wanted him to come along for support. He didn't want to stay for the 4-hour process, but offered to pick me up. When it took 15 minutes longer than expected, he got angry, left, and I had to call an Uber. After months of me taking care of him through a severe illness, he broke up with me 3 days after I graduated, blocked my number, and disappeared without explanation. Story 15. I was the psycho myself. I don't like using that word since the stigma around mental health is already bad enough. But you get my point. I have borderline personality disorder, BPD. When you think of the stereotypical crazy ex, you're probably thinking of us. Back when I was undiagnosed and a very stressed out teenager living with an abusive, alcoholic, narcissistic parent, I had no self-control. I was a mean, manipulative person who dated people just to gain social power and made friends to control them. I didn't enjoy it. I hated myself for being so cruel, but I was seriously struggling with my mental health. It's not an excuse, but it does explain my behavior. I felt like I had no control over my own life, so the only way I could cope was to control others. People with BPD can come across as destructive, chaotic, and malicious, but in reality, we're extremely sensitive. We don't have emotional armor, so we adopt a tough persona to protect ourselves. People with BPD are terrified of abandonment, whether real or perceived. We fear that those we love will leave us, and we judge ourselves harshly. With low self-esteem and unstable self-image, we believe we're undeserving of love and healthy relationships. So if we think someone will leave, we often sabotage the relationship preemptively. We also struggle with compartmentalization, flipping between extremes. Love and hate, good and bad. If you're kind to us, we idolize you. But when you inevitably make a mistake, we might demonize you. Not because we hate you, but to protect ourselves from perceived abandonment. There's a great book called I Hate You, Don't Leave Me that I recommend to anyone dealing with BPD. It helps explain the chaos and emotional destruction that come with the disorder. The key thing to understand is that people with BPD are often self-destructive. We're usually trying to hurt ourselves, not others. The rates of self-harm, substance abuse, and suicide are high among people with BPD. It's also important for partners or ex-partners to seek therapy, as there can be trauma from these relationships for both sides. I was eventually diagnosed with PTSD, OCD, ADHD, depression, and anxiety, and I've worked hard to improve myself through therapy. I wish I could apologize to the people I hurt. While I don't deserve forgiveness, I still live with the guilt and try to be a better person every day. Interestingly, BPD might be renamed emotional instability disorder in the next DSM to help reduce the stigma. I ended up pursuing a degree in forensic psychology with a focus on personality disorders. Story 16. I went over to his place before he got home from work as usual. I opened his computer, I had the password, and found that he had left accounts open on dating sites, plenty of fish and cougar life. I checked the messages, and he had been trying to meet up with women near us for a while. When I called him, he freaked out and claimed he set the accounts up for a friend, but I knew that was a lie. When he got home, I broke up with him. In response, he took my phone and keys, slammed the door in my face, and physically restrained me to keep me from leaving. It was terrifying because he was much bigger than me. He was screaming with veins bulging from his neck, holding me down as tightly as he could. I ended up curled in a ball on the couch, dissociating. I hadn't realized until then how abusive he had been. I finally talked him down and he let me go. I didn't go to the police because I was in shock, but I had bruises and was shaky for days. I later found out that he was charged with assault and false imprisonment for attacking another woman. I regret not going to the police because if I had, he might be in prison now. The worst part? I got back together with him for a few more months until things escalated. When we finally broke up, he tried to contact me for years. I still get panic attacks when I hear a man yelling at a woman, and I check his name in court records every now and then, hoping he's in prison. Story 17. It started with small things, comparing me to his exes, but always in a favorable way at first. He was overly enthusiastic about joining me in my hobbies, but then he'd make fun of them. It was subtle at first, just jokes that I laughed off, but it became more frequent. Eventually, the jokes turned into backhanded compliments. When I got upset, he'd brush it off, saying he was just joking. He had the prettiest eyes, so light blue they were almost white, but there was nothing behind them. One night, while we were relaxing and watching a game, out of nowhere, he said he wanted to die. I took him seriously and started asking questions, but he shook his head and claimed he never said it. Things got worse after that. The emotional abuse escalated, but I kept remembering the good times. It wasn't until he physically checked me in a rage that I ran straight to my sister. She looked me in the eyes and said, He's going to kill you. You know that, right? That was the wake-up call I needed. I left him, left everything I had at his place, and moved on. It took years, but I've moved on. Story 18. One day, while on the phone, I heard her sipping something. When I asked what it was, she told me it was toilet cleaner. She had struggled with self-harm before, and I had supported her through it, but this was different. She used the threat of self-harm to manipulate me into staying in the relationship. I was young and emotionally overwhelmed, but looking back, I doubt she was actually drinking cleaner. Still, it was one of the most twisted things I've experienced. The worst part is, I seem to be attracted to chaos. I tried dating someone normal, but I got bored. Now I'm worried I'll always end up with someone hiding their own issues. Story 19. I worked with my ex. We were both correctional officers. I thought it was a good idea because he had gone through the background checks and mental health evaluations required for the job, so I figured he was stable. We were together for a few months before I moved in with him. After about a year, I became pregnant, and that's when he started to change. One night, as I was tucking my oldest son from a previous marriage into bed, he said with tears in his eyes, "Mama, I see the devil in his eyes." We had both started noticing his personality shift. He would say things that made us fear for his mental stability, but the first real sign was his ability to switch between personalities to suit the situation. As I was preparing for the baby, I found a box of books about verbal judo. I had never heard of such a thing, but something clicked in my mind. Once I started figuring things out, he began making threats. He'd tell me about a bullet he had with his name on it, leaving it out where we could see it. He even hung a noose on the back deck that swayed in the wind for weeks. I got my boys and myself out of there, but that's when the real nightmare began. His buddies from the sheriff's office started following me everywhere I went. Once, when I went to Walmart, a friend of his who worked security falsely accused me of shoplifting. The charges were dropped when the video footage mysteriously disappeared, but it didn't stop him. Now I'm fighting for custody of my son. He's keeping him from me out of spite, and it kills me every day wondering what kind of hell my poor little boy is going through. Story 20. A few hours after a fight, she texted me, "Goodbye." When I asked her what she meant, she responded, "It's bleeding." I rushed over to her apartment and found her lying on the bathroom floor with cuts on her wrists, thighs, and other parts of her body. She had used a dull pair of scissors, so none of the cuts were deep enough to be life-threatening, but they were still noticeable. She was panicking and couldn't speak clearly or stand up. I cleaned her cuts and put her to bed. She didn't want me to call anyone, and since none of the cuts needed stitches, I didn't. After she calmed down, we talked about what led to this, and in the span of an hour, her emotions shifted wildly. She went from feeling depressed and worthless to blaming me for her state, saying she hated me, and then became very affectionate, saying she was the best thing that ever happened to me. I stayed with her for a few months after that, but I never truly felt like I knew her anymore. That night taught me a lot about the potential volatility of the human mind. Story 21. I know better now, but back then, I didn't realize how much I was the problem. I was in a 6-year relationship, and when she broke up with me, I had to go to therapy to understand my actions. I could give reasons for my behavior, but the truth is, they're just lame excuses. I was a jerk who didn't want to own up to the fact that I was the bad guy. I showered her with unwanted affection after the breakup to try to win her back. I even made cutout hearts with things I loved about her and taped them all over her car while she was at work. At the time, I didn't think it was stalking, but looking back, it totally was. I also sabotaged her new relationship by logging into her email and Facebook, taking screenshots of private conversations, and sending them anonymously to her parents. When she confronted me, I lied to her face, but we both knew the truth. To get back at her for hurting me, I started drinking, smoking, and doing drugs. It took therapy, rehab, and a lot of work on myself to realize how much damage I had caused. I'm a better person now, but that part of my life still haunts me. In my small town, people remember me for the harm I caused, and no matter how much I've changed, the damage is done. Story 22. She was gorgeous. She told me, half jokingly, that she had been stalking me on Instagram for a month before reaching out to me. At first, I brushed it off, but then I realized we had matched on a dating site 2 months earlier, and she never mentioned it. I was attracted to her, so we ended up having sex on the first date. The next day, she wanted to come over again, which I thought meant I had done great. But this time, she withheld intimacy entirely. I figured maybe this was something real, so I rolled with it. But then she kept coming over day after day, leaving her things at my place, and taking up all my time without showing any affection. She told me I needed to be careful not to break her heart because her ex-boyfriend had abused her. I told her we needed to either be intimate or slow things down and just go on dates until she felt comfortable. After that, she never spoke to me again. I ended up shipping her things to her parents' house and never heard from her again. Story 23. I dated a guy who claimed to be a New York firefighter. After a few months, I realized he wasn't a firefighter at all. He was a drug addict. When I tried to break up with him, he told me I couldn't because he was in the mafia. He threatened that if I left, his guys would come after me and my family. He even claimed to have a file on my dad's business and knew everything about him. The moment I realized how deranged he was, he got into my car bleeding and asked me to take him to the hospital. The doctor later told me he suspected my ex had stabbed himself. It hit me then that he had made the whole thing up to manipulate me. After that, he held me hostage in the relationship for a few months. He once pulled a gun on me and wouldn't let me go to work because Tony was coming over to meet me. Of course, Tony never showed. I called the police and played them a voicemail where he threatened my life, but they said there was nothing they could do. I later found out he had 9 restraining orders against him, most from his parents. I finally got away by moving to another state. Story 24. I dated a girl in college for 2 years, and it took me way longer than it should have to realize she was unstable. All my friends knew from the start. Some of the signs while we were dating were subtle, although she was very controlling. The really crazy stuff happened after I broke up with her. I worked on campus during the summers, and so did she, but in a different department. By this point, we had broken up, but every time I walked by a certain rock outside my building, she would be sitting on it, crying. If I was with friends, she would stare at me. And if I was walking with a female friend, I'd get a text minutes later saying, "Oh, is that who you're with now?" The strangest incident happened when a friend across the courtyard from my room called me one night. They had seen my ex dressed in all black, hiding in the bushes under my window, spying on me. When I called her to ask what she was doing, she claimed she was at Walmart. Months later, at a big spring concert on campus, I was there with my new girlfriend, who is now my wife, and my ex walked right up to us. She looked at my wife, then at me, and said, "This is fine, I don't care. This is totally fine," before walking away. Story 25. The first real red flag in my relationship with him was how he spent the first month shaming me for expressing any attraction to him, saying that only SLTs actively sought out S, even with their boyfriends. The first time we had S, he penetrated me while I was sleeping, without consent or lubricant, because in his mind, women who enjoyed S were SLTs, and he had to make sure I knew what to expect. He would regularly assault me. He enjoyed seeing the pain face and would intentionally hurt me as much as possible. He would assault me anally, without warning or preparation, and then yell at me for shaming him for wanting to try something new. I was left bleeding and in agony afterward. One time, when he was angry, he used objects from a fruit bowl to assault me, right in front of an uncovered street-facing window. He refused to use protection and wouldn't let me use contraception, but made it clear that if I got pregnant, it would be my fault, and he would deal with it for me. I was nearly homeless when we were together, starving because I couldn't afford food. He used this to control me, providing food only late in the day to ensure I complied with his demands. When I started gaining weight again after finding some income, he would show me pictures he had taken without my consent from when I was at my most malnourished and tell me I looked better then. Story 26. I dated someone who was deeply struggling with their gender identity and sexuality. Over the years, I encouraged them to open up, and I was ready to support them through their journey. When they finally confronted their extremely conservative family, they told them, "I'm trans and thinking about transitioning." Then I didn't hear from my partner for days. Finally, I received a voicemail filled with screaming, accusing me of putting the idea in their head and trying to tear their family apart. Their family had convinced them that I was manipulating them. We broke up horribly after that. And even now, years later, I'm still devastated. In retrospect, the relationship had been incredibly volatile due to their internal struggles. But we had been so close for so long that it still hurts not having any closure. I wish we could have made amends. Story 27. It wasn't one incident that stood out. It was a series of events in a very short span of time. Everything seemed perfect between us at first. She was out of my league and we clicked really well. One night, after hanging out all day, we kissed and it was great. We spent the night talking and everything seemed normal. The next day, she told me that her ex had assaulted her and was stalking her. As a teenager, I didn't know what to do or say, but but I believed her. Soon, she started saying she saw him hiding in bushes when we were out walking, even when no one was there. She had a guy friend who clearly liked her, and I tried to be respectful because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. But one day, while the three of us were hanging out, she suddenly straddled me and started kissing me right in front of him. I stopped her, feeling bad for the guy. A little later, she disappeared while we were walking, and when we found her, she claimed her ex had attacked her. I knew something was wrong, so I broke up with her. A few hours later, I got a voicemail from her and her friends calling me names and hurling insults. Recently, I found out that her newborn baby passed away, and she is now under investigation for the child's death. It's horrifying to think that if I hadn't ended things when I did, I could be in that situation now. I'm incredibly thankful I got out when I did. Story 28. I'd been dating this girl in college for about 8 months and decided to give her a key to my house. One day, I came home as usual, only to find her in bed with one of my roommates. She then tried to spin some nonsense about how I was actually the one cheating on her by not cheating on her. I told both of them to get out of the house, and that's when she locked herself in my room and called the police, falsely claiming I had taken her hostage. My roommate apologized and helped explain to the police what was going on. Honestly, the only reason we're still friends is because he owned up to his mistake and helped me right then. Eventually, she came downstairs with the police, acting like nothing had happened and that she was never there. The police ended up arresting her, and she resisted the entire time they tried to put her in the car. Story 29. Not exactly an ex, but a girl I'd been talking to for a while and messed around with. She swore she had never used drugs, but it was clear she had a history with them. We lost touch, and about 12 months later, I found out she had been arrested for possession. Maybe that doesn't make her crazy, but the ease with which she lied was sad. I also had a roommate I had briefly dated a few years earlier. We kept in touch and decided to live together, but she started to act irrationally when I made it clear I didn't want to pursue a relationship. She became hostile, started drama, and eventually tried to get me kicked out. The police were called, and they explained the process to her. I planned to move out the next month, but a few days later, I overheard her talking about how to get me out of her life, even asking someone about casting spells. The next morning, I found a basket of my things from the bathroom, along with seashells wrapped in wax paper with strange symbols, including a pentagram. I confronted her, but she denied doing it. A few days later, she offered to give me my portion of the rent back if I moved out sooner. I agreed. But when she asked me to sign a receipt for the money before actually giving it to me, I refused. She snapped, shoved me into a metal rack, and then ran out of the room screaming that I had hit her. Her mom, who lived next door, came running over, and my roommate started fake crying, saying I had assaulted her. I called the police again, and they didn't believe her story. She ended up getting arrested for assault, and I moved out shortly after. Story 30. This isn't about an ex of mine, but about my current boyfriend's ex, who is completely unstable. They broke up in March 2016 after 3 years together, and she had a new boyfriend by the end of that month. I met him in August. Even after the breakup, she would show up at their old apartment, which she had moved out of, screaming at me. She even messaged me on Facebook, telling me I wasn't allowed to go to the apartment because she used to live there. She had been incredibly controlling while they were together, too. She didn't let him talk to any of his female friends because she was too insecure. They worked together, and when they broke up, she told everyone at work that it was because she had gained a few pounds, which caused their coworkers to hate him. She used to track his phone to see where he was anytime he left the house. One time, she even got mad at him for going to Target to buy toilet paper, thinking he was going there to meet other women. To this day, my boyfriend still gets anxious about doing certain things around me because of how she used to react. Story 31. When I was younger, I fell deeply in love with a guy who was smart, charismatic, and rebellious. We bonded over our shared ambition, being two intellectuals in a small town. But slowly, he led me down a dangerous path without me even realizing it. We started planning what was essentially a radical overthrow of the government, with society stratified by birth and skill. I was too in love and naive to see the danger. I kept supporting him because seeing him so passionate was intoxicating. My brother finally intervened by pointing out that I was neglecting my responsibility to our special needs sister, whom I had guardianship of. This led to a huge argument between my brother, my boyfriend, and me, which became violent. Tragically, my sister was caught in the middle, and she passed away as a result. That day I lost everything: my sister, my boyfriend, and my brother's respect. I've never been the same. Regret doesn't even begin to describe what I feel. But I've dedicated my life to honoring my sister's memory by promoting understanding and building bridges, hoping to ease the guilt I carry. Story 32. At first, everything was great. The relationship moved fast but felt really good. We both thought we were madly in love for about 2 weeks. Then one morning, she suddenly had an emotional meltdown because she didn't think I was scrambling the eggs properly. It was a massive blow-up that ruined the morning because I wasn't scrambling the eggs right. That was the first sign. After a while, emotional outbursts became more frequent, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells around her. It was tough because the good times were really good, and I kept chasing those moments, but they became less and less frequent. One day, I Googled the phrase walking on eggshells and found articles about dating someone with borderline personality disorder. It was eerie how everything fit. It was like someone had observed our relationship and written those articles based on it. That's when I realized I'd been emotionally abused for months and it was wearing me down. For those who don't know, borderline personality disorder is a serious condition. It doesn't mean someone is on the border of having a personality disorder. It means they definitely have one, and it can cause a lot of harm to themselves and others without help. I never hated her. I knew she wasn't trying to hurt me on purpose. She was acting out of her own pain. But I also realized I wasn't capable of giving her the help she needed. It was hard, but I believe breaking up was the best thing for both of us. Story 33. I was downstairs watching TV at my ex's house, while she went upstairs to use the restroom. 2 minutes later, I heard a bang from upstairs, but didn't think much of it. When she came back down, she angrily asked who a certain woman was and why she wanted to know if I was coming to see her next week. I told her it was my cousin, which was true, but she didn't believe me. She insisted I was lying and kept pushing for an hour. I couldn't take it anymore, so I told her I was going to leave because trying to argue was driving me crazy. I went upstairs to get my phone, which was charging, only to find that the screen was smashed. I grabbed my things and headed toward the door, but she blocked my way with a knife. In the moment, I wasn't scared. I didn't think she would actually use it. I calmly reassured her that I cared about her and would never cheat. I even suggested calling my cousin to prove it. She insisted that my side chick would lie for me, so it didn't matter. As we continued talking, things seemed to calm down, and I said it would be best if I left and we could talk later. But as I reached for the door, she took a swipe at me with the knife. I grabbed her arm, managed to get the knife away, threw it across the room and walked out. Looking back, I should have run as fast as I could, but at the time, I didn't think it would go any further. Story 34. Back in 2010, I had an online relationship with a guy who, just recently, admitted to me that he was a sociopath. I know that's not quite the same as being psycho, but it still freaked me out. He admitted to doing some pretty messed up things, like toying with people's emotions and not really caring about anyone but himself and his money. He even admitted to manipulating me emotionally just for his own amusement. Even after our relationship ended, we kept in touch over the years with casual, "Hi, how are you?" messages. I thought we had a kind of friendship, especially since I felt bad for him when one of his parents passed away right after we broke up. This was real. His family posted about it on social media at the time. But the scariest thing he told me was that during his time in the military, he exorcised his demons by doing things that hinted at violence and worse. He claimed that because he was in the military, he could do whatever he wanted and implied that this included some very disturbing things. It was a chilling conversation, and I've cut all contact since. Story 35. My first boyfriend in high school was a few years older and had already graduated. I was very self-conscious, but also unusually interested in physical relationships, so I let this go on way too long. Some memorable moments included him showing up at my high school job, Baskin-Robbins, grabbing my cell phone, one of the old Nokia models, and smashing it against a wall because he saw I had texted someone about school and thought it was code. He would show up outside my house all the time, asking who was there, and when it was just family or friends, he would run away. He would accuse me of being unfaithful, claiming he could tell by how my body felt. Once I started working at Home Depot because I couldn't stay at Baskin-Robbins due to his harassment, he would claim he could smell other men on me. Then he introduced me to drugs saying, "This is cocaine, it's awesome." I ended up addicted for 2 years. I skipped out on college because he was afraid I'd fall for someone else, which I would have. Eventually, I realized I wasn't as unattractive as he made me feel. I finally broke free from that nightmare. The best part of our breakup? He rode his bike to my house. He was 23, 24 at this point and didn't have a car. And as I broke up with him, his bike was stolen. He had to walk home crying. It felt like poetic justice after 3 years of threats, violence, and manipulation. Story 36. Psycho 1. Right after high school, a girl I barely knew came by my workplace, a BBQ deli joint downtown, and gave me her number. We hung out for a few days and she told me she was into tattoos. So we went to a tattoo parlor and she handed the artist the weirdest, most messed up drawing of a dead twig-like tree. She told him, "It's my family tree." I was like, "But it's dead?" She ended up getting a full back tattoo of it, and it was probably the worst tattoo I've ever seen. Things got stranger. She tried to convince me that her mother had purchased 3 unreleased crossbows. When I pointed out that those crossbows hadn't even been released yet, she said her mom had already sold them. I got the feeling she was a compulsive liar, so I ended things. After we broke up, she started dating a guy who had a drug problem, and they were all over social media with baby announcements. Then one day, all the baby photos disappeared, and instead, she started posting pictures of fresh tattoos every week. Psycho 2. I met this girl on a dating app, and after hanging out for 2 weeks, she told me she wanted to move out of her apartment. I offered to let her stay with me for a few days until she found a place. That turned into 2.5 years of an abusive, one-sided relationship. She had serious drinking problems, social anxiety, and depression, and I became her emotional punching bag. She had no friends and would get angry if I even hinted that I wanted to spend time with mine. I built her a car from scratch, but she never drove it. She insisted on using my car instead. As the relationship wore on, her drinking worsened, and she would throw temper tantrums, screaming at me until 2 a.m. One night when I tried to leave. She tackled me and started hitting me, begging me not to go. That was the last straw. I broke up with her after that. A week later, she came home with a brand new car, despite claiming for 2 years that she couldn't afford one. She moved out a month later, but I'm still dealing with the financial and emotional fallout of that relationship. Psycho 3. After the breakup with Psycho 2, I dated a girl who seemed like a dream at first. But she hated my Australian Shepherd puppy, even though the puppy was sweet. One day I came home to find her all bloody, claiming my puppy had mauled her. But none of the injuries looked like dog bites, and there were no teeth marks. I was skeptical, but I still gave her the benefit of the doubt. As time went on, she started having intense panic attacks, flailing around and throwing things. I wasn't sure if they were real or exaggerated, but it became too much. The final straw came when she called me a loser and blocked me on social media because I couldn't hang out with her while I was at work. I haven't heard from her since, and I feel bad for anyone who gets involved with her next. Story 37. One night, while on a date with my fiancée, she suddenly started a random fight in the car. I was tired and didn't want to argue, which only made her angrier. She started saying the most hurtful and provocative things she could. That was the first big warning sign, but I ignored it and married her anyway. We lasted 7 years and had 1 child together. In our final year of marriage, she snapped one night and stabbed me in the leg. If it hadn't been for our sleeping child down the hall, I would have left that night. A few months later, she cheated on me, felt guilty, and left me. Even after she left, she still tried to control my life. She would come over to pick up our son for her weekends, and she'd ask to use the bathroom. My now wife, who I was dating at the time, pointed out that my ex was doing this just to snoop around the house. I thought it was pathetic, but apparently that's the kind of life some people lead. After I remarried, she sued me for custody of our son, who was 10 at the time, and she had left when he was 2. We spent 5 years in family court, and although she didn't win custody, she did a lot of financial damage. My son turned 18 2 years ago, and I haven't heard from her since. It's been peaceful, but the cost of those 16 years of hell was enormous. Story 38. My ex and I were in the car one evening. She had contacted my best friend because I had gone for a short walk, and she freaked out. She started talking to him about our relationship, which I really didn't appreciate. I told her I had just gone a block away to calm down because I didn't want to be upset around her. She misunderstood, thinking I was jealous and accusing her of hitting on him. We were driving to her parents' house, and when I was about to merge onto the highway, she slapped me hard on the chest. I said, "Hey, what the hell?" but kept driving, thinking she got the point. I was going 65 miles per hour when she started punching me in the face. This 5'2" woman hitting me, a 6'0" guy, as hard as she could. I couldn't take it anymore. Dizzy and shaken, I pulled over. I broke down crying because I couldn't believe she disrespected me like that. Earlier in the relationship, I had told her never to hit me because I tend to black out and could hit back, but thankfully I didn't. Then she demanded I get out of her car, even though I had paid for it, but it was under her name. As I walked away, she called after me and asked for the shoes she had given me as a gift. I was furious and threw them back at the car. I started walking along the dirt with just my socks on. It was humiliating. I wiped my tears and kept walking. 5 minutes later, she pulled up, begging for forgiveness. I couldn't believe it, but I went back. Things only got worse after that. I tried reporting it to the police, but they didn't take me seriously. It's frustrating how society handles these situations. Story 39. I was working 2 jobs to support her, while she barely worked one and spent her money on unnecessary things. She moved in with a friend of mine, and I was supposed to move in as well, but I couldn't afford it. So I stayed with my parents, who barely charged me rent and let me eat for free. 2 weeks later, she started getting upset because I wasn't spending every spare moment with her, even though I was working from 2 a.m. to 10 a.m., then starting my second job across the city at 12 p.m. and working until 10 p.m. By the time I got home, ate and showered, I was lucky to get 2 hours of sleep. She decided that because I couldn't be there, she would cheat on me with her roommate, who was also my best friend. I found out during a vacation I had paid for, where we went to a convention. The best part? We had borrowed my friend's sister's car, and I was the only one with a full driver's license. When I said, "I'm done with this," and took a bus home, they were stuck paying for a hotel for a week with no way to drive home legally. Eventually, my friend's sister had to come get her car and drive them home. After I left, they couldn't afford their apartment anymore and lost it. Story 40. I was invited to a concert on a Saturday night. A friend had tickets for himself and his wife, and they invited me to tag along with their extra ticket. I wasn't a huge fan of the band, but I hadn't spent time with my friend in a while, so I agreed. I invited my significant other, but she declined, saying she didn't want to pay to see a band she wasn't into. Instead, we planned to have lunch before I met up with my friend. The lunch plans were chaotic. Between her waking up late, deciding she didn't want to go, then changing her mind, and eventually complaining about parking, we drove between her place and the restaurant 6 times. As the situation got more frustrating, we never actually had lunch. And by the time I needed to leave for the concert, she was upset that I was still going. On the way back to her place, she saw a bird near the car and got angry because I didn't swerve to avoid it. It became clear she was trying to make me late for the concert. I dropped her off and drove away. She called me 2 minutes later, accusing me of lying about my plans. She claimed she was following me but didn't even know where I was going. Then, on the second call, she said she got into a car accident. On the third call, she threatened Suic and accused me of abandoning her. On the advice of my friend's wife, I told her that if I didn't hear back from her that she was okay, I would call for help. I also reached out to her close friends, one of whom she was secretly involved with, and asked them to check in on her. Her response? "How dare you involve my friends? That's not your place." By Monday, I left her a voicemail saying, "We need to talk." She claimed she was pregnant and dragged that lie on for 3 months. 3 months later, I found her with the friend she had been seeing behind my back. It took me a long time to realize that just because someone has issues doesn't mean they deserve your help if they don't try to control them. She was later diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. The signs were there long before, but when it got bad, it got really bad. Story 41. We had been talking about family pets and how sometimes their odd quirks made them cuter. He started giggling uncontrollably, telling me about the best one. It was his grandma's dog, which he referred to as retarded because its head always tilted sideways and it drooled. As he laughed to the point of tears, he told me that the dog used to be annoying and yappy until he fixed it by putting it in the microwave for 10 seconds. He thought he had improved the dog. At that point, we had been dating for about 5 months and living together for 2. Some of the things he had been doing already made me feel uneasy, like trying to isolate me from everyone I knew, but this was terrifying. I knew I had to act calm and get away from him safely. I moved out while he was at work. Afterward, he stalked me, though it wasn't proven. I strongly believe he set a car on fire under my apartment balcony and then called me, offering comfort, telling me he had driven by and seen the flames and that I'd be safer with him. He was extra scary because On the surface, he seemed so sweet and normal. He was cute, wrote poetry, played guitar, and had lots of friends. After we broke up, he convinced everyone we both knew that I had cheated on him and was addicted to pharmaceuticals, neither of which was true. He even got me fired from my job by showing up during my shifts, threatening me under his breath while charming my boss and customers, until I broke down in tears. Years later, the owners reached out to apologize because he had done the same thing to another ex. Story 42. There were little red flags throughout the relationship that I didn't pick up on at the time. Everything seemed to go downhill after our 6-month anniversary. She became increasingly toxic, getting mad at me for things like arriving 15 minutes late when I had said I'd be there around 1 inch and showed up at 1:15. If I got upset with her over something, she would accuse me of being selfish, but she would get angry with me at least once every time we saw each other. Since she was my first for a lot of things, I thought this was just how relationships were supposed to be, and that I had to put up with it to prove my love. Because of her, I thought I had a low drive for intimacy, though it's not super high, but I later realized I just didn't want to be with her. Fast forward 3.5 years later, I finally worked up the courage to break up with her. She hacked my Facebook and posted a huge rant about how I was a cheating liar and had given her an STD. I've always prided myself on being honest, so seeing that crushed me. But what really solidified that she was unwell was when she called me at 2 a.m., threatening to blow up my dorm because she couldn't visit me anytime she wanted due to the dorm's ID security. I reported her to campus police and let them listen to the voicemail to show how serious it was. At the time, I was scared for my life. Now, I just feel bad for her because she has deep mental issues that she likely won't be able to resolve due to her pride. Story 43. The first guy I dated after a breakup, let's call him Jason, and I were on maybe our 3rd date. We went to the beach, and since his friend was staying with him, I brought one of my girlfriends along for a double date. We were having a great time in the car, laughing, joking, and having normal conversations. Jason was fantastic at holding conversations and asking interesting questions without making it all about himself. As someone with social anxiety, I loved that he could carry the conversation. He even included my friend in the discussions, which I thought was sweet. We were playing a game of hypotheticals, and Jason asked, if I went to jail for 2 years, would you stay and wait for me? I laughed and said, right now, no. We're not even officially dating yet, so no, I wouldn't. I thought it was all in good fun, but Jason got serious and said, wow, I see where your loyalty stands. I was confused and explained that we hadn't been together long enough to talk about loyalty like that. He just responded with, okay, I see, and started talking to his friend, still laughing, so I thought everything was fine. When we got to the beach, Jason walked ahead with his friend. I didn't think much of it, but my friend came back over to me and said that Jason had told his friend that the hypothetical situation put things into perspective for him, that he was putting in more effort than I was, and that it seemed like I didn't care. I was completely confused. I tried talking to him, but he just ignored me and walked away. I spent the rest of the night sitting alone on the sand while he ignored me until it was time to leave. All of this because I wouldn't hypothetically stay with him if he hypothetically went to jail. This was a huge red flag, but it wasn't our last date. I was young, and when things were good, they were really good, but don't worry, I eventually got out before it caused too much damage. Story 44. Not my story, but my sister is married to someone with a troubling past. After serving 4 years for a DUI and possession with intent, cocaine, he disappeared for a while. When he was in prison, my sister and her 4 kids lived with my parents. After he was released, my parents refused to allow him near their house, so my sister and her husband began looking for an apartment. However, in the Washington, D.C. area, with his record and poor credit, it was difficult to find an affordable place for a family of 6. In the meantime, the plan was for him to live at a campsite at Prince William Forest Park. That lasted about 3 weeks before he went missing. After about 2 weeks of his disappearance, my youngest sister, let's call her B, called my parents' house to tell my other sister, we'll call her A, that her missing husband was at her trailer in Lake Anna, Virginia, banging on the door. Sister A told Sister B to call the police and she would come over right away. The drive from Woodbridge, Virginia to Lake Anna takes over an hour. By the time Sister A arrived, the trailer park was swarming with police and paramedics. As Sister A approached the scene, an officer came up to her. She asked what happened, and the officer explained that Sister B got into a fight with her boyfriend. Sister A was stunned, not knowing Sister B had a boyfriend. She asked, "Where is her boyfriend?" The cop pointed to the back of a patrol car and said, "Don't worry, we got him." Sister A then said, "That's not her boyfriend, that's my husband." This man, a well-built 260 pounds guy with at least 6 felony assault charges, had seriously hurt Sister B, who was a petite 110 pounds girl. His assault on her caused her to be hospitalized for a week. She was unrecognizable in the crime scene photos. Her eyes were black, her jaw was broken, she had concussions, bleeding from the ear, a busted eardrum, and missing teeth. In court, my brother-in-law tried to argue that he was defending himself from her, pointing to some scratches on his face and his mugshot. The arresting officer testified that the scratches came from him wrestling with the 6 officers it took to subdue him, as he had tested positive for PCP during the arrest. He was sentenced to 8 years for aggravated assault, resisting arrest, and parole violation, but only served 4. In 2012, after being released, he and my sister, Sister A, moved to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Despite having never had a driver's license, due to multiple DUIs starting before he was even old enough to drive, he was driving one morning with my sister in the passenger seat. He crossed the solid yellow line, causing a serious collision that left my sister pinned in the passenger seat. As my sister was trapped, waiting to be cut out of the car, he approached her and asked her to tell the authorities that she had been driving. He didn't have a license, had drugs in his system, and driving would be a violation of his parole. My sister foolishly agreed. At the hospital, while my sister continued insisting she was the driver, the police didn't believe her. The seatbelt scars on her right shoulder proved she'd been the passenger. Finally, after being threatened with an obstruction of justice charge, my older sister, this is not Sister B, convinced her to tell the truth. It wasn't until my older sister told her that the driver of the other car had been killed in the accident that my sister realized the seriousness of the situation. My brother-in-law was sentenced to 2 years for that incident and served additional time in Virginia for parole violations. Despite everything, my sister is still married to him. To this day, he claims he was defending himself from Sister B and that his sentence for the accident was too harsh because she pressed charges. Story 45. In this story, I was the one at fault. In middle school, I dated my first and only boyfriend, and looking back, I'm embarrassed to realize that it was probably 10 months of pure hell for him. I regret that when he looks back on his first relationship, it's me he remembers. I took away what could have been pleasant memories of a first relationship. I'll give some context, but no excuses. My behavior was my own fault. I've been gay all my life, and during middle school, I struggled to accept it. I used religion to try and push the thoughts away, but it didn't work. When I first saw him, I thought God had sent me a compromise. He had long hair, soft features, full eyelashes, and looked very feminine. I convinced myself that dating him would make me normal. We clicked and started dating, but every day, those thoughts crept back in. Every time they did, I sought validation from him, hoping it would prove I wasn't gay. Every bit of affection from him was a distraction from the truth. If I found myself attracted to a girl, I demanded he give me more attention to push those thoughts away. I called him obsessively, made him write me love notes, and spent hours talking to him. If he didn't meet my expectations, I lashed out, verbally abusing him for neglecting me, when in reality, I was using him to avoid facing myself. It got to the point where he would run away from me. When he finally broke up with me, I felt like my world was collapsing, not because the relationship was over, but because the lie I was living was over. I wish I could go back in time and tell myself that it was okay to be who I am, that fighting it would only hurt others and myself. People tell me it's okay because I was young and struggling, but that doesn't matter. My orientation wasn't an excuse to treat someone that way. I was wrong, and it will forever stain my memories. If you're reading this and find yourself in a similar situation, stop. Accept yourself at your own pace, but don't drag someone else into it. You'll regret it for the rest of your life. Story 46. A few days after starting a relationship with a girl from high school, she showed up with a large cut on her arm. She claimed she woke up with it and insisted I touch it because my hands felt good. It was clearly self-harm, and I had no idea what to do. Before we became official, she showed no signs of instability, but suddenly it was like the floodgates opened. Every day at school became about consoling her, and when we got home, the conversations continued, and she would get upset if I didn't respond immediately. It was overwhelming. She was hurting me emotionally, and I barely knew her. yet she expected me to shoulder everything. I'd just come out of a rough relationship and was looking for a friend, but she wanted a hero, and I just couldn't do it. I know how bad this all sounds, and I've heard it all since we broke up. After I ended things, she accused me of using her, claiming I had tried to hurt her in various ways. She spread rumors and alienated me from my friends. She took everything, and soon after I started self-harming too, only to be accused of doing it for attention. This girl seemed determined to ruin my character, and I let it happen. To this day, it still enrages me. This all happened during my freshman year, and it left me feeling isolated throughout high school. All I did was try to let her down gently and remain her friend. And for the record, nothing physical happened between us. She pressured me for it constantly, romanticizing the idea in a way that felt uncomfortable. We barely knew each other, and she wanted to give herself to me. No, Miranda, I did not use you. You couldn't handle rejection. Story 47. There wasn't just one incident that opened my eyes. It was a series of moments that made me realize this guy wasn't good for me. This is just a collective summary of what happened. We dated in high school, and I was new to relationships, so I went with the flow. The relationship was rushed. He asked me out after barely talking for a week, and my naive self said yes. A few months in, he forced our parents to meet and got angry when I felt uncomfortable about it. He would lose it every time I even acknowledged another guy. I couldn't hang out with or talk to my best male friend because he convinced himself my friend would hurt me. He said he trusted me but didn't trust other guys, which was his excuse for isolating me from my male friends. When I got my phone service back after being without it for a week, I found dozens of texts cussing me out because I had told my friends, especially my best guy friend, that I loved them platonically. He believed I should only say, "I love you," to him. He repeatedly told me that platonic relationships between girls and guys didn't exist, and that all my male friends secretly wanted to be with me. He also isolated me from all my friends because he wanted to be my priority. He felt that even talking or hanging out with others meant I was putting them above our relationship. It got to the point where I was afraid to hang out with anyone besides him. Even though he never explicitly said I couldn't, the idea of it set him off every time. We fought about it constantly, and every time he promised to change, he never did. When I considered breaking up, he would tell me I'd never find anyone better or who loved me more. I called him out for being manipulative, and he would apologize, only to keep saying the same things. After 2 years, I finally found the courage to end things. I told him we could still be friends, but I needed space from the clinginess. He agreed, but when I didn't respond to his attempts to talk, he cussed me out for lying about staying friends. He didn't understand the concept of space. He sent a half-hearted apology, which I ignored. Later, he messaged me asking if I or my friends wanted to buy drugs, then asked me out on a date. I haven't heard from him since, but he apparently still talks about me according to a friend who lives in our hometown.